Usually when we talk about a medical diagnosis, there's this very comforting expectation of, well, precision.
Oh, absolutely. It's very binary.
Right. It's almost like engineering or something. Like
Right.
if you fall and break your arm, you go to the hospital, they do an x-ray, and you see that jagged white line on the black background.
Hmm.
And the doctor just points at it with a pen and says, there it is. That's the problem.
Yeah, the bone is either broken or it's not. And honestly, that certainty itself provides a kind of psychological relief.
Even if it hurts.
Exactly, even if the physical reality is painful, because we inherently like things to be visible. We really want them categorized.
But then you step out of the hospital and into the world of human psychology. You step into this whole realm of our internal narratives,
Yeah.
the invisible, just crushing pressures we put on ourselves.
Which is entirely different.
Totally.
Hmm.
And suddenly that beautiful, precise X-ray machine is just completely useless.
Mm-hmm.
We're looking at a landscape that is incredibly murky.
Yeah, murky is the perfect word for it.
And the symptoms of this particular modern condition we're exploring today, they're highly deceptive. Because, to the outside observer, they often look exactly like success.
Which is what makes it the absolute definition of diagnostic muddy waters, right?
Right.
When the disease looks like a trophy, the patient rarely realizes they're sick until they are entirely depleted.
So, to really understand what we're talking about here, I want to introduce you, the listener, to a hypothetical person. We're going to call this person Alex.
Okay, Alex.
Now, Alex could be your neighbor, your boss, your partner. Honestly, Alex might even be you.
It's very likely.
Because Alex has done everything that modern society explicitly asks for. Alex has climbed the corporate ladder with just ruthless efficiency.
Checking all the boxes.
All of them. Alex has optimized their morning routine down to the millisecond. We're talking ice baths, journaling, the whole 9 yards.
The whole productivity playbook.
Exactly. They track their macros, they hit the gym, they meticulously curate their social media profiles so that everything looks vibrant and intentional and just perfectly balanced.
But then what happens?
Well, here's the reality of the situation. It's 2 a.m., the house is completely dark, and Alex is staring at the glowing screen of a smartphone, feeling utterly and completely hollow.
Wow. Yeah, the visual of that glowing screen illuminating a face in a dark room, it's intensely potent.
It really is.
It just strips away all the armor of the day and highlights the profound isolation of the modern high achiever.
And Alex feels like a worker on a relentlessly speeding factory assembly line. Just, snapping the next piece onto the belt over and over, faster and faster.
With absolutely no idea what the final product even is.
Exactly. Or if it has any inherent value whatsoever. So the dilemma, the crushing confusion that Alex is facing in that dark room is that Alex is exhausted to the very marrow of their bones.
Just completely burnt out.
And desperately, desperately wants to quit. But the mere thought of giving up feels like a catastrophic failure. Like it triggers a profound existential panic.
And that panic is not accidental at all. Society dictates a very rigid script here. Winners never quit and quitters never win.
We've heard that since kindergarten.
Right. So Alex is caught in the psychological trap, fully believing that pushing forward, regardless of the emotional numbness or the physical toll, is the only acceptable definition of success.
Which is wild when you think about it.
It is. Conversely, yielding, like simply stepping off that speeding assembly line, is viewed not as a smart shift in strategy, but as a fundamental moral flaw.
Yeah, we don't just see quitting as a change of direction. We see it as a corruption of character.
Exactly.
But today, our mission for this whole extensive exploration is to completely dismantle that assumption, to figure out how to help Alex.
We're looking at some incredible source materials today.
We really are. We're analyzing this fascinating psychological and philosophical framework, drawing from classical literature, mid-century behavioral experiments, and modern psychological theory that completely flips the script on what it means to surrender.
It's a total paradigm shift.
We're going to explore what it actually takes to commit to oneself, rather than committing to a script written by a culture obsessed with endless productivity.
And the core paradox we're unpacking today is staggering when you really sit with it.
Lay it on us.
To find the life we actually want, we must sometimes commit the ultimate societal sin. We must intentionally, consciously surrender our current path.
Wow. Okay, let's tackle that stigma of surrender head on. Because if we're going to propose that the path to a better life might involve giving up, we really have to address the massive judgmental elephant in the room.
The societal conditioning.
Right. We are conditioned from the moment we can walk to view quitting as the ultimate sign of weakness. You finish your P's, you finish the soccer season, Even if you hate it, you finish the degree.
The cultural baggage is immense, yes. But the psychological framework we're examining suggests something highly counterintuitive.
Which is?
That not giving up can actually be the most destructive choice a human being can make.
Wait, really? Not giving up is worse?
In many cases, yes. Think about classic tragic figures from literature. We often misunderstand tragedy in modern times.
How so?
Well, we tend to think a tragic hero falls because they're weak or lazy or easily distracted. But if you look closely at these archetypal characters, the ancient kings who lose their minds, the obsessive generals who destroy their empires and their families,
I see where you're going.
their fatal flaw is rarely a lack of strength.
So if it's not weakness, what is actually bringing them down?
It is an obsessive, rigid inability to abandon their goals. They lock onto a target and they will pursue it even as the pursuit systematically dismantles their morality, their relationships, and their own sanity.
That's terrifying.
It is. Their refusal to yield, their stubborn refusal to look around and say, you know what, this path is no longer serving me, I need to stop, is the exact mechanism of their downfall.
And there's a term for this in the text, right?
Yes. The philosophy calls this the tragedy of completion. They simply must finish what they started, even if the act of finishing destroys them entirely.
The tragedy of completion. I am fascinated by that concept. It's like we're absolutely terrified of leaving a chapter unfinished, even if the chapter is literally a horror story.
Exactly.
I'm trying to figure out why we do that. Like, why is returning to a blank slate so threatening to us?
Because giving up forces a transition. It strips away your current identity, even if that identity is making you miserable.
Right.
To give up is to willingly step into the void of the unknown. And human neurology is fundamentally wired to crave certainty.
We want to know what's coming next.
We need to know. We
Yeah.
will cling to a dead-end job or a deeply toxic relationship because the pain of the known is predictable. We know the exact contours of that pain. We know how to survive it.
But the unknown.
The void of the unknown triggers our deepest survival anxieties because literally anything could be out there.
I want to play with an analogy here because this is really reminding me of the sunk cost fallacy, but on a more spiritual level.
Okay, let's hear it.
Imagine we're stubbornly pushing this massive, jagged boulder up a ridiculously steep hill. We're sweating, our muscles are tearing, we are utterly miserable.
A literal uphill battle.
Right, but we keep pushing it simply because we've already been pushing it for 10 years. We completely forget that we have the option to just step aside, release our hands, and let the boulder roll away down the hill. We manufactured our own struggle.
That is a very apt visual. We become so identified with the struggle that we think the pushing is who we are.
But I have to challenge this premise because I can hear the skepticism from you, the listener. How do we actually know the difference in the moment?
It's a tough distinction.
Yeah. How do we know when giving up is a healthy, necessary surrender versus when it's just a lack of resilience? When are we wisely stepping aside from the boulder and when are we just avoiding hard work because we're being lazy?
That is the essential friction of this entire concept.
Oh.
And the framework offers a brilliant, highly clarifying distinction here.
Okay.
Giving up the psychologically healthy kind is never a passive collapse. It is an active negotiation.
An active negotiation. Walk me through the mechanics of that. What does that actually look like?
When you engage in healthy surrender, you are specifically and consciously sacrificing one path in order to create space for a more authentic one. It's a calculated prediction of a better future. You aren't quitting because you lack the energy to work. You're quitting because you realize your immense energy is currently being spent building your own prison.
Wow. Building your own prison.
Right. A lack of resilience is running away from a challenge simply because it requires effort and you want to be comfortable. But healthy giving up is recognizing that the effort is directed toward a destination you no longer have any desire to reach. You are actively taking back your agency.
So if I'm understanding this, it's really a reallocation of resources. You're taking your energy back from the counterfeit goal so you can invest it in the real one.
Precisely. You are reclaiming your capital. But that introduces a totally new problem.
Of course it does.
To even realize what the real goal is, you have to fundamentally change how you perceive and interact with the world around you. You cannot find a new destination if you're still looking through the exact same lens that got you lost in the first place.
Which brings us to a wildly interesting concept from an anonymous 20th century diary experiment documented in the research. And I gotta say, this completely shifted how I think about my own daily routine.
It is a remarkable piece of behavioral observation.
Set the stage for us. Who was this researcher?
Well, the researcher in question was trying to solve a problem very similar to Alex's. She realized she had no idea what she actually wanted out of life. She was moving, acting, achieving, but feeling absolutely nothing.
Total numbness.
Yes. So she decided to track her days meticulously, cataloging her internal states to find out when she actually felt a genuine sense of contentment.
And her conclusion was that human beings don't just have one generic mode of paying attention. She discovered that we operate using two vastly different, almost biologically distinct types of attention.
Right.
She categorized them as narrow attention and wide attention.
Let's examine narrow attention first, because the imagery she uses to describe it is incredibly visceral and honestly very accurate to the modern experience.
She described this state as being like a sniffing beast with its feral snout to the ground. A feral snout. That paints such a predatory, desperate picture.
It is entirely predatory. It's a state of mind born from scarcity. When you are in a state of narrow attention, you are entirely goal-oriented.
Everything is a target.
Exactly. You view everything and everyone around you only in terms of their immediate usefulness to your objective. You look at a colleague and think, can this person help me get promoted?
Right.
You look at a traffic jam and think, this is an obstacle to my morning meeting. If we look at Alex in that dark room at 2 a.m., Alex is completely trapped in this mode. Alex is treating life as a relentless, exhausting series of targets to be acquired.
I think we all fall into that, like, I need this promotion so I can get this salary bump so I can buy this specific house in this specific neighborhood.
Always the next thing.
The feral snout is just aggressively sniffing the dirt trail for the scent of the next reward.
Yeah.
And the inherent tragedy of that is when your snout is dragged along the ground, you physically cannot see the sky.
That's a great way to put it.
You miss the entirety of your actual life because you're only looking at the very next step.
Which is why the researcher's identification of the second state, wide attention, is so critical for psychological survival.
The open horizon. How does she define wide attention?
Wide attention is defined as a state of looking at the world without wanting absolutely anything from it.
I have to pause there.
Yeah.
Looking without wanting. In our hyper-consumerist, hyper-optimized culture, that feels practically impossible. We are trained to always want something,
Yeah.
to always extract value.
Oh, it's incredibly difficult to cultivate, but it is essential. When you stop looking at the world as a resource to be consumed or an obstacle to be overcome, the whole picture finally emerges.
Yeah.
The diary experiment noted that shifting into wide attention magically re-enchants the mundane world. It replaces the chronic anxiety and the crushing boredom of the daily grind with an immeasurable, profound contentment.
Because you aren't waiting anymore.
Right. You are no longer waiting for the next milestone to grant yourself permission to be happy. You are simply present.
So let me make this real for you, the listener. Think about your own day today, from the moment you woke up to right now as you're listening to this. Be honest with yourself.
It's a tough question to ask.
It is. Are you just sniffing the ground for the next reward? Are you looking at your overflowing inbox, your long commute, maybe even your conversations with your own children, as just friction?
Just hurdles.
Just things to get through so you can reach some imaginary finish line at the end of the day?
Yeah.
Or are you actually taking in the landscape? Are you allowing yourself to experience even 5 minutes of wide attention?
And the transition between those two states is the real crux of the issue here. You can't just command a feral, starving beast to stop sniffing for food. It doesn't work like that.
No, it's going to keep sniffing.
To make that shift, to let go of that desperate predatory focus, an individual must feel deeply secure in themselves. You have to possess a foundational belief that you are fundamentally okay, even if you do not acquire the next external reward.
And in a society that constantly tells you that you are not enough, achieving that internal security requires a massive paradigm shift.
Yeah.
It requires an unshakable anchor.
It requires a radical act of self-commitment.
I am so glad we are finally here, because this concept is the hinge upon which this entire philosophy turns.
It really is the core.
When I first encountered this idea in the reading, I actually bristled at it a bit. It sounds almost eccentric at first. The framework proposes that the ultimate solution to Alex's problem, the cure for the hamster wheel, the feral snout, the late-night emptiness, is to make a lifelong, unconditional commitment to oneself, akin to a formal marriage vow.
Marrying yourself in sickness and in health,
Huh.
for richer, for poorer,
Let's be very clear about what this means. This is not just tolerating yourself. This is not just practicing standard self-care by lighting a candle and taking a bubble bath on a Sunday evening so you can grind harder on Monday.
No, not at all.
This is an ironclad, unconditional vow of loyalty to your own existence.
And we must immediately clarify a massive misconception here because the modern, slightly cynical mind will instantly reject this phrasing.
Absolutely.
This concept of self-marriage is absolutely not about toxic narcissistic egoism.
That was my initial reaction. People hear, marry yourself, and they picture someone who is obsessed with their own reflection, taking selfies 24 hours a day, completely ignoring the needs of their community and their family.
That is a fundamental misunderstanding of what narcissism actually is. True narcissism is the exact opposite of this commitment.
How so?
A narcissist is driven by an agonizing internal void, a deep, unacknowledged self-loathing. They destroy the world around them through endless consumption and manipulation because they are desperately trying to fill an unfillable hole with external validation. They do not love themselves. They are running from themselves.
I want to use an analogy here to visualize this difference because it helped me a lot. Think of an uncommitted self, a person who fundamentally rejects their own worth, as a bucket with no bottom.
Okay, a bottomless bucket.
You can pour all the external validation of the world into that bucket. You can pour in corner office promotions, thousands of social media likes, prestigious academic degrees, a string of romantic conquests.
Oh, the external stuff.
But because the bottom of the bucket is completely missing, it will never ever fill up. The validation just falls right through and you are left empty, demanding more.
That is a mathematically perfect visualization of the uncommitted life. Healthy self-commitment, this radical act of marrying yourself, is the act of permanently repairing the bottom of the bucket.
Putting the base in.
Yes. It is about becoming an internal oasis of peace. The philosophy points out that if you do not accept yourself, you will inevitably project your internal war outward onto everyone around you.
Which destroys everything.
It does. You'll ruin your romantic relationships with rampant jealousy or unrealistic demands, and you will burn yourself out trying to prove your worth to a corporate world that, frankly, does not care about you.
So the paradox is that if you actually vow to love and commit to yourself unconditionally, you become far less needy. You become a significantly better partner, a better parent, a better friend, because you aren't constantly demanding that other people fill your bucket. You are already full.
Exactly. You operate from a baseline of surplus rather than a baseline of deficit. And the framework offers a highly urgent, honestly chilling speculation about the danger of living without this self-commitment in our specific modern era.
This was the part that made the hair on my arm stand up.
Yeah.
The technological threat.
We cannot ignore the environment we live in. We are currently living in an age of exponential technological growth. We are surrounded by artificial intelligence and highly sophisticated, opaque algorithms.
They're everywhere.
And these systems are quite literally designed by some of the smartest human minds on the planet for one singular purpose: to harvest our attention and exploit our deepest psychological insecurities for profit.
The feral snout of the algorithm is looking at us as the resource. We are the dirt it's sniffing.
That is exactly what is happening. The warning here is stark. Individuals who do not fiercely protect and love themselves, who do not possess that internal anchor of self-marriage, will be psychologically shredded by the digital world. If you do not intimately know your own worth, the algorithm will gladly assign you a counterfeit version of it. It will keep you perpetually anxious, perpetually comparing yourself to curated fictions, and perpetually consuming in a desperate attempt to feel whole.
Psychologically shredded by the digital world. That is an incredibly sobering thought.
It's the reality we're facing.
So how do we defend ourselves? What does this all mean practically? How does an exhausted person like Alex actually sign this metaphorical marriage certificate?
Well, the philosophy doesn't just leave us floating in abstract theory.
Thank goodness.
It breaks this self-marriage down into very specific, actionable virtues. Let's examine the first one, which focuses entirely on the mind.
All right, let's get into it.
The first virtue involves systematically freeing the mind. The foundational premise here is that society, as restrictive as it can be, does not limit us nearly as much as we limit ourselves. We act as our own harshest, most draconian censors.
Oh, I see this constantly. We restrict our own potential by assuming we already know our absolute limits. We say things like, I'm just not a creative person. I am terrible at public speaking. I could never learn a new language at my age. I could never start my own business.
We build the bars ourselves.
Exactly. We meticulously build our own cages out of these statements.
And we decorate those cages with our self-doubt until they feel like comfortable homes. The psychological texts suggest a specific daily exercise to break this hypnosis. They refer to it as mental stretching.
I decided to try this exercise, and it is surprisingly difficult at first.
Oh, it feels very unnatural.
It really does. The idea is that every single morning, you sit down with a blank piece of paper and you write down wild, completely uncensored thoughts about your own potential. You write things that feel absurdly arrogant or entirely impossible to your current limited mindset.
Give us some examples.
Statements like, I am a profound visionary. I have the intellectual capacity to completely change my industry. I'm completely and utterly unbothered by the opinions of others.
And the immediate reaction most people have is to feel foolish or fraudulent, like, I can't write that, it's not true.
Right, the imposter syndrome kicks right in.
But the point of mental stretching isn't necessarily that these statements are objectively, factually true in this exact second. The point is the stretch itself. You are aggressively forcing your brain to entertain possibilities outside of its self-imposed prison.
You're loosening the muscles.
From a neurological standpoint, you are actively disrupting the habitual neural pathways of self-deprecation.
You are essentially telling your internal censor, the voice that always says no, to take a permanent vacation.
Exactly.
But once you start stretching the mind and breaking those cognitive loops, you inevitably collide with the physical reality of your existence.
Yeah.
You have to turn your attention to the vessel that carries your mind around. Which brings us to the second virtue.
Honoring the body as a faithful, lifelong companion.
Yes.
And this represents a profound shift in perspective, and for many people, the most difficult one. Historically, and certainly in modern societal conditioning, we are actively taught to treat the physical form as an object.
Just a machine.
A machine to be optimized, a visual aesthetic to be starved and injected, or simply an annoyance to be ignored so we can achieve higher productivity.
Bringing it back to Alex. Alex sacrifices sleep without a second thought, survives entirely on synthetic caffeine, and routinely ignores physical pain signals, a tweaked lower back, a chronic headache, just to hit those quarterly productivity metrics.
Just pushing through the pain.
Alex treats the human body like a cheap rental car. You just drive it into the ground because it's not yours.
And the framework offers a visceral, almost shocking remedy for this deep alienation from the physical self. It is an exercise known as the two chairs dialogue.
I will warn you, the listener, this exercise requires a level of vulnerability that might make you squirm, even if you are totally alone in a locked room.
It's intense.
Very. The setup is simple. You place two empty chairs facing each other. You sit in one chair, and you decide that you represent your conscious mind, your I. And you imagine as vividly as possible that your physical body is sitting in the chair directly across from you.
And then what?
And then you are instructed to open a dialogue out loud.
You must speak to your body as if it were a separate, autonomous entity. And for the vast majority of people who attempt this, the very first thing that needs to be communicated is a profound apology.
Yes. It usually starts with, I am so sorry I ignored your crushing fatigue for the last 5 years.
Yes.
I am sorry I fed you absolute garbage while demanding elite performance. I am so incredibly sorry I stood in front of the mirror every morning and verbally insulted your appearance.
It sounds highly unusual, but the psychological impact of externalizing the body and treating it with the respect due to a loyal, lifelong companion is staggering.
It really shifts things.
It begins to bridge the mind-body divide that is the root cause of so much of our modern chronic stress and autoimmune issues.
I completely see the value in that, but I have to play devil's advocate here for a second.
Please do.
It is relatively easy to love your body or express deep appreciation for it on a really good day. You know, when you've had a solid 8 hours of sleep, you just finished a great workout, and the lighting in the bathroom mirror happens to be incredibly flattering.
Sure, when everything is working.
But what happens when you feel terrible? When you are exhausted, fighting off a virus, or you look in the mirror and you just feel deeply, fundamentally insecure? How do you maintain a marriage vow to your body in those moments?
This is exactly where the concept of unconditional commitment is forged. It is easy to be committed when things are perfect. The philosophy emphasizes that self-marriage means actively accepting the ugly days.
The messy parts.
Think about a traditional marriage vow with another human being. You don't suddenly stop loving your spouse and demand a divorce just because they get the flu, look pale and terrible, and are cranky.
Right. You bring them soup, you adjust your expectations, you give them grace.
Exactly. You extend compassion. You do not have to feel beautiful or strong or optimized to treat yourself with absolute dignity. If you look in the mirror and feel a wave of intense insecurity, the self-marriage vow means you look at yourself and say, I am feeling deeply insecure right now. I honor that painful feeling, and I commit to treating this physical body with profound respect, regardless of my current fleeting aesthetic judgment.
Wow.
Dignity is not contingent on beauty. Dignity is not contingent on optimal performance.
That is a massive relief to hear. You don't have to use toxic positivity to gaslight yourself out of a bad body image day. You don't have to force yourself to say, I look like a supermodel when you don't feel like one. You just have to maintain baseline dignity.
That's all it takes.
Which actually transitions us perfectly into the emotional realm, because once we establish a truce with the mind and the body, we have to deal with the messy reality of our feelings. This brings us to the concept of sober feeling.
Sober feeling is arguably the most transformative tool in this entire framework.
Okay, unpack that for us.
Most people operate with one of two default settings for processing difficult emotions. They either suppress them completely, shoving the anger or the grief down deep into their subconscious until it inevitably manifests as a physical illness or a sudden catastrophic explosion of rage.
The pressure cooker approach.
Exactly. Or they go to the opposite extreme and get entirely swept away in theatrical narrative drama.
Oh, I know exactly what you mean by the drama. They either pretend they aren't angry at all, or they're breaking plates, screaming about how the entire universe is fundamentally unfair, and recounting a 10-year history of how they have been victimized.
Sober feeling offers a radical third path. It demands that you stand entirely still in the fire of an emotion.
Standing still in the fire. That sounds painful.
It is intense, but it is brief. It means focusing exclusively on the raw physical sensation of the emotion. Let's use anger as an example.
Okay.
If you are furious, what does that actually feel like in the physical body? Is your chest tight? Is your breathing shallow? Is your jaw clenched? Is there a literal sensation of heat rising in your face?
You focus purely on the biology of it.
You are instructed to feel that physical reality intensely, but, and this is the critical mechanism, you must do it without attaching a mental story to it, without blaming your boss, without replaying the narrative of why you were wronged.
So you completely separate the physiological sensation of the emotion from the mental screenplay you've written to justify it.
Precisely. The exhausting drama is never the emotion itself. The drama is the relentless looping story we tell about the emotion. When you strip away the narrative, an emotion is simply a wave of neurochemical energy passing through a biological system. It peaks, it sustains for a few moments, and then it naturally subsides.
Let's take that a step further, because this directly connects to a psychological insight the philosophy refers to as the magic trick of problems.
Yes, the magic trick. It's a brilliant observation of how we actively create our own misery. The argument is that we manufacture our own suffering through a mental sleight of hand. We take a completely natural, neutral phenomenon, and we slap the label of problem onto it.
I want to use an analogy from nature to illustrate how absurd this is when you really look at it.
Let's hear it.
Imagine you are walking through an ancient old-growth forest. You come across a twisted, gnarled old oak tree. It is completely asymmetrical. Half of its branches are broken off from a storm, and the bark is peeling away.
Okay, a very gnarly tree.
You do not look at that tree and judge it. You don't stand there and say, wow, this tree has a serious problem. It is fundamentally failing at being a tree. It should be perfectly straight. You just observe it. You might even find it deeply beautiful in its unique weathering.
But the very second we turn that gaze inward upon ourselves or upon our own natural emotional states, we apply incredibly rigid, unforgiving labels.
Yes. If we feel a natural passing wave of sadness, we don't just observe it like the oak tree. We immediately panic and say, I have a problem, I am depressed, I am broken, I need to fix this immediately. We create an enemy out of our own internal nature. We turn our own internal weather systems into a full-blown crisis.
And by labeling a natural emotion a problem, we initiate an exhausting internal war. We try to fight the sadness or suppress the anxiety, which paradoxically only prolongs the emotion and adds heavy layers of guilt, shame, and frustration on top of the original feeling.
I want to challenge you, the listener, to try this right now, wherever you are. Think about one specific trait or emotion you genuinely dislike about yourself. Maybe it is your chronic anxiety. Maybe it's your tendency to be disorganized.
Something that bugs you.
Now imagine simply observing that trait just for 60 seconds, completely stripping away the label of problem. Just watch it the exact same way you would watch that twisted asymmetrical oak tree in the forest. What actually happens when you drop the label?
The psychological framework suggests that the internal war instantly dissolves.
That's amazing.
It is a radical, immediate de-escalation of internal conflict. And here is the immense payoff. Once that internal war ceases, a massive amount of cognitive and emotional energy suddenly becomes available to you. Energy that was previously being burned up in a futile war against yourself.
And the obvious question becomes, what do we do with all that reclaimed energy?
We finally use it to discover what actually matters to us, which transitions us into the critical phase of discovering true values and escaping what the philosophy calls the excluded self.
Let's bring Alex back onto the stage. So Alex has done the work. Alex has stopped fighting the internal war. Alex is practicing wide attention and trying to maintain self-dignity.
Alex is making progress.
But despite all of this, Alex still feels this lingering, haunting sense of alienation. The text describes this as feeling excluded from your own life, like you are a ghost attending your own dinner party. How does that happen if you've stopped fighting yourself?
The psychological analysis points to the architecture of human core needs. Every single human being, regardless of background, is driven by fundamental psychological needs.
What are they?
These are generally categorized as the need for security, the need for variety or novelty, the need for significance, the need for genuine connection and love, the need for personal growth, and the need for contribution beyond oneself.
Okay, so 6 foundational pillars. Security, variety, significance, connection, growth, contribution.
Yes. And that profound feeling of being alienated, of being an excluded outsider in your own existence, almost always stems from a massive strategic error in how we attempt to fulfill those needs.
A strategic error. Let's break that down.
We frequently pursue a life strategy that aggressively fulfills one single need while completely starving another equally important need. Returning to our protagonist, Alex might be working 80 hours a week, sacrificing everything to achieve the title of senior vice president.
Right.
That strategy is highly effective at fulfilling Alex's need for significance. Having that title feels important. It demands respect. But that exact same 80-hour strategy is absolutely starving Alex's fundamental need for genuine connection, because Alex has zero time or emotional bandwidth left for friends, family, or a partner.
So Alex feels alienated because the holistic self is wildly out of balance. Alex is furiously feeding the literally starving for love and connection.
Exactly. It is an unsustainable strategy. And to correct this imbalance, we have to clarify what our true authentic values actually are. We have to strip away the conditioned corporate societal values we swallowed without thinking and unearth our own.
And the framework offers a really powerful, albeit slightly morbid, thought experiment to achieve this clarity. It is often referred to as the funeral speech exercise.
It is a classic psychological tool for a very good reason.
It aggressively cuts through the daily noise. The exercise asks you to vividly imagine your own funeral. You are gone. Your loved ones, your colleagues, your friends are gathered around. What are the 3 specific qualities you genuinely want them to remember you for?
Not your resume.
Exactly. What do you want them to say about how you lived your life? And spoiler alert, nobody in the history of humanity wants their eulogy to be, Alex was absolutely incredible at answering Slack messages within 4 minutes and optimizing quarterly revenue streams by 3%.
Never. It never happens. The qualities that surface during this exercise are almost exclusively related to presence, kindness, courage, integrity, or passion. They are values of deep character, not superficial metrics of productivity.
But discovering those true values can trigger a massive existential panic.
No, definitely.
Like, what if I do this funeral exercise right now? I realize my core values are creativity and connection. And I look at my life and realize my current reality doesn't reflect those values at all. Do I have to blow up my entire life today? Do I have to have a perfect master plan figured out by tomorrow morning?
The philosophy provides a very comforting and pragmatic speculation on this exact anxiety. It draws a stark dividing line between 2 distinct ways of navigating life: the essentialist approach and the experimentalist approach.
Let's pull those apart because this is a huge relief to me.
The essentialist operates under the belief that there is a fixed, perfect, immutable, true self hidden deep inside them, and life is a high-stakes pass-or-fail test to uncover that essence and live it perfectly.
That sounds exhausting.
It creates an agonizing amount of anxiety. If you choose the wrong career path or date the wrong person, the essentialist believes they have fundamentally betrayed their destiny.
That sounds like a paralyzing way to live. Every decision carries the weight of eternal failure.
It is paralyzing. The experimentalist, however, operates from a completely different paradigm. The experimentalist understands that human beings are fluid. We do not have to know exactly who we are or what our perfect life looks like from day one.
Thank goodness.
We are allowed to run experiments, we are allowed to try on different values, see how they actually feel in practice, give things up when the data shows they aren't working, and allow our values to organically evolve over time.
So you don't need a rigid master plan, you just need a hypothesis. You can say, let's run a 6-month experiment. What happens to my baseline contentment if I prioritize connection over significance for the next half year? If it works, keep it. If it doesn't, run a new experiment.
Precisely. It entirely removes the crushing pressure of perfectionism and replaces it with genuine curiosity.
I absolutely love that framework. But of course, identifying your values, even experimentally, means absolutely nothing if those values just live in your head.
That's the hard truth.
You can sit on a meditation cushion all day, perfectly envisioning your core values, but eventually you have to stand up, walk out your front door, and interact with the real world. Which brings us to the ultimate friction point, the courage of action and the mirror of relationships.
This is where the abstract philosophy meets the harsh pavement of reality.
The texts make a very bold, almost aggressive claim here. They state that self-love is not a passive, gentle meditation. It is fundamentally a martial art.
A martial art. That implies discipline, rigorous practice, and most importantly, the willingness to engage with direct resistance.
Yes. It requires the courage to manifest your internal truth in the external world. You have to act on your values, and the framework issues a very clear warning.
It's a very severe warning.
The exact moment you start acting on your true values, the moment you begin practicing this martial art of self-respect, you are going to violently disrupt your existing relationships.
It is a completely unavoidable consequence of growth. The psychological model we are analyzing suggests that our external relationships are a direct, unfailing mirror of our internal self-respect.
A mirror. Explain how that reflects on us.
When you are living out of alignment, when you are disconnected and uncommitted to yourself, your self-respect is low. Consequently, you will often tolerate people who treat you poorly.
You just accept it.
You will accommodate individuals who demand that you suppress your true nature or shrink yourself just to make them feel comfortable and secure.
Going back to our earlier analogy, because your bucket is empty and missing its bottom, you accept whatever meager scraps of attention or conditional love people throw into it, even if it's toxic.
Exactly. But the dynamic changes instantly the moment you marry yourself.
How so?
The moment you repair the bottom of the bucket, establish your values, and stop betraying yourself, you look around and suddenly realize that you can no longer tolerate people who demand you play a small, subservient role in their lives.
The mirror is reflecting a completely new image of who you are, and the old relationships simply do not fit that reflection anymore. If you have spent your entire life as a people pleaser, and you suddenly start setting firm boundaries, the people who massively benefited from your lack of boundaries are going to be very, very upset.
They will be outraged. They will accuse you of changing, of being selfish, of disrupting the peace of the family or the workplace. They will exert immense pressure to force you back into your old, compliant shape.
I have to push back on this on behalf of Alex because this sounds incredibly lonely. If Alex, our hypothetical protagonist, completely changes the rules of engagement and stops playing the corporate game, stops people-pleasing, won't Alex just lose all their friends? Isn't there a very real risk of ending up totally isolated and alone on this moral high ground?
It is a profound and completely valid fear. It is terrifying to change the rules of engagement when you don't know who will stay. But the philosophy reframes this fear beautifully.
I need some reassurance here.
It argues that it is vastly, immeasurably better to have a few genuine, deep connections who love and respect your authentic, wide-attention self than to be surrounded by a massive crowd of fair-weather fans who are only applauding the false mask you wear.
You are actively trading quantity for quality. You are losing a crowd of fans, but you are creating the space to gain a true companion.
Furthermore, setting a boundary is not inherently an act of rejection. It is actually a profound invitation.
An invitation.
Yes. When you begin to operate with deep self-respect, you are silently inviting the people around you to step up, heal their own wounds, and grow alongside you. Now, some will absolutely refuse the invitation, and they will naturally fall away, but others will be inspired by your newfound authenticity and will rise to meet you at that much higher level of engagement.
That is a beautiful, empowering way to look at it. A boundary isn't a wall to keep people out. It's an invitation to elevate the relationship to a place of mutual respect.
And that realization brings us to the broader reflection on human potential, the ultimate so what of this entire demanding psychological and philosophical journey.
So let's bring the narrative full circle. Let's look at Alex one last time. It's still 2 a.m., the screen is still glowing, but tonight, something inside Alex fundamentally shifts. Tonight, Alex finally decides to give up.
But not by throwing their life away and not by collapsing in a state of hopeless defeat.
No, Alex gives up by intentionally, courageously sacrificing the exhausting, narrow-focused race. Alex actively negotiates surrender. Alex steps off the speeding assembly line to make physical and emotional space for a life characterized by wide attention. Alex drops the boulder. Alex stops fighting the natural twists in the oak tree.
And in doing so, in making that radical commitment to themselves, Alex discovers the final and perhaps most beautiful paradox of our entire discussion today.
We have covered a lot of ground. What is the final paradox?
We have spent this entire time talking about focusing inward. We've discussed self-love, marrying yourself, setting rigid boundaries, identifying your own personal values. To an outside observer, this sounds like a highly individualistic, almost selfish philosophy.
You can sound that way, yeah.
But the ultimate paradoxical goal of radically committing to oneself is actually to acquire the capacity to truly serve others.
I want to make sure I fully grasp this. How does intensely focusing inward lead to serving outward?
It comes down to emotional economics. When you are operating from a place of chronic deficit, when your feral snout is glued to the ground, desperately sniffing for external validation, money, or praise, you are essentially begging the world to give you what you lack. You are, emotionally speaking, a drain on the world's resources. You are taking.
Right.
But when you marry yourself, when you finally establish that unshakable internal security, you transform from a drain into an overflowing spring.
Because the bucket is finally full. And when a bucket is full, whatever else pours into it naturally overflows into the surrounding area.
Exactly. You no longer need to frantically extract emotional value from other people just to survive the day. And because you are internally full, you can finally lift your head, turn your wide attention outward, and truly, clearly see other people for the first time. You can offer genuine help, deep, unattached compassion and true innovation to humanity because you are finally giving from a place of absolute abundance, not a place of desperate lack.
The ultimate act of self-love becomes the ultimate act of public service. It is like the airplane oxygen mask construction. You literally cannot help the person next to you until your own airway is secure.
It entirely redefines what it means to be a contributing, valuable member of society. You contribute not by grinding yourself down to dust on an assembly line until you have nothing left, but by doing the hard work of becoming a whole, secure, expansive human being.
Which completely and utterly shatters the initial myth we talked about at the very beginning of this conversation. The cultural lie that giving up is always a failure. Giving up the wrong path isn't a failure. It is the absolute prerequisite for finding the right one.
It is the only way to find it. You cannot hold on to the wrong life and reach for the right one at the same time. Your hands are full.
Why? We have covered a massive amount of psychological and philosophical territory today. We have dismantled the tragedy of completion, explored the vital difference between wide and narrow attention, recognized the feral snout, repaired the bottomless bucket, learned the magic trick of emotional problems, and practiced the martial art of self-respect.
It has been a deeply rich and challenging exploration of human nature.
But as we close out today's conversation, I want to leave you, the listener, with a final provocative thought, something to mull over as you transition back into the reality of your day. We started by talking about the diagnostic muddy waters of our internal lives and how we can't just look at a simple X-ray to see exactly where we are broken. But maybe, just maybe, the premise is wrong.
How so?
Maybe we aren't broken at all. Maybe we are just profoundly exhausted from spending all our energy pretending to be someone else. So I'll leave you with this question. If you were to look at that jagged white line on the X-ray of your life, and you realize it wasn't a break that needed fixing, but rather a boundary that needed respecting, if you completely and courageously abandon the exhausting story of who society says you should be, what incredible, authentic thing would you finally have the space to become?